for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, so what I'd like to do, we'll just give it a couple, you guys can stay here, but I would just like to take a moment to bring up the Stetson School thing. Just, it won't take very long, that's why I'd
We
rather.
can go sit back here.
No. If, it's simple. Come on up if you'd like, Chief, and we'll just give you. This is more just a chance to publicly give an update to anybody watching or in the room about the relationship between the town and Stetson and the efforts that both have been making to work together to help some of the issues that were brought up over the last year. If you could present your perspective and the process of the last few months.
Yes, we have, what we've done is when we sat down and had a meeting, myself and Joe already, we talked about things that we could do to, I don't know, get everybody on the same page and have the same kind of purpose when we have, say, the runaways or things of that nature. I had asked him to do two things. The first was to create some type of form that could give us a history, a profile of the whoever it is that might have taken off, or in some cases who we might be dealing with for some other types of calls, that would give us an idea if they had criminal history or not, because a lot don't, if they were violent or not, if they had a designated illness or some type of designation that would tend to cause them to act in a certain way, like, for example, you know, it's big in police training now, autism. You know, that if you're dealing with somebody who's autistic, you should know that, because the reactions that you're going to get could also mimic resisting arrest. And so I asked him if we could put something together, and he was completely in favor of it and very helpful in doing it. And he's calling it an acuity rating that would give us this picture. So if a kid goes missing, and it turns out that they have some type of, you know, a mental illness, or for lack of better words, or some type of a condition, something that we need to know so that we can adjust how we're doing this. They might just be in danger. They just might be at risk for themselves. There might be nothing criminal about them. And conversely, we want to know if they are a danger to us, because then we want to be ready. And as we discussed, we have to treat everybody as if they're a danger unless we know otherwise. And so we want to know. So we put together this acuity rating. It's in its final phases because it has to go through their legal department. There's HIPAA and other things play into it. So we're working on that. So we feel that's good, and then we have to come up with a good way to disseminate that. And it's going to go to the ambulance in many cases as well. And it'll really help everybody get on the same page. So we're really helping the kids that need help, and not, you know, and that's basically the idea. So then we also worked on having some training, and I had asked them, because I've received this training before in the private sector, the training would be sitting down with a psychologist or a psychiatrist and have them discuss with the officers basically what they should expect from different types of classifications, different types of mental illnesses, so that they can recognize and not trigger. So if it's a paranoid, somebody who's suffering from schizophrenia, we want to be able to deal effectively with that person and not trigger something worse because we don't know, or we don't know what to recognize. And it's not something that you deal with day to day, but we do need to know. And so there's training for police officers in the police world, but I wanted to get some training from somebody who's not training as if they're training in a police academy. It's a different perspective, somebody who works with these kids on a regular basis. So they were nice enough to do that. So we had our entire department trained. Some of the ambulance was trained, all at our new building, where I think we did it in 2 or 3 sessions so that we could get everybody. They brought down a psychologist that works for them. Guys were able to ask questions. He went over all of the categories that he had, gave the guys some good information. And basically, the second part of that was that everybody got to talk to everybody. So that was nice because their staff was down, meaning Joe Allred and his second in command, plus a psychologist, in our own room, kind of sharing ideas and what ifs, and, you know, there was a situation like that, and I think that was very helpful as well. So now there's a lot more, you know, face-to-face. So next time we go up to Stetson, it'd be somebody we just spend a couple hours talking to, and, you know, there's more of a personal relationship there. So we've come up with these ideas. They've been very good at responding to them. The guys said that they got something out of all of it. So, you know, we move forward.
Oh, good, good. It's, and I know when I spoke to the fire chief, he was saying similar, positive about helping with the training, helping with the communication, obviously with his EMTs and paramedics that may have to arrive and respond to a call. They also would have better understanding of what type of personality they may be dealing with, and if there's certain things you do or don't do because of this particular individual, or how to approach them, knowing what you're getting into. When I heard from that, and then I ended up actually talking to Joe Allred briefly, it sounded like the town and Stetson are working towards a very positive communication process and program, and it looks like it's the means to an end in addressing some of the concerns that were raised prior.
Right.
So for me, that's a real positive. You know, I'm really happy to see that they stepped up and they're doing what they can within their means. Obviously, there are certain legal things that'll keep them from taking further steps with further details of certain things. That was my perspective, and that's mainly the reason I wanted to bring this back up on the agenda, was partly to let the town know what's going on, but not here just from me. I appreciate you showing up and having the time. I believe the fire chief's either involved in training or something going on right now, so he couldn't make it. But I didn't want it to seem like it was just coming from me, and I don't know if either of the other select board members have anything else they want to add to this discussion.
Of course. I know they were going to basically try to give you a general red, yellow, green status for
Right.
kids, so people understand. You're also, if someone has run away, you're going to get the ability through a simple coding to know what type of behavior we're dealing with. If it's somebody that's just in danger because they're out lost and in the woods and exposed, or somebody might have medical issues, or somebody might be violent, you'll have 3 different classifications, which, without giving away HIPAA and private information, it's a very, very good way to give you a better idea and understand what you're dealing with. The only other thing I'd asked, and I don't know if they were able to give you, is to supply within those 3 categories a percentage of students who fall into each category.
They did not.
You might want to just be good, just to get an idea. It'd be nice. Still, there's nothing HIPAA we're asking for, but it'd be good to know what type of general population's there. It's not going to change your response to each individual one, but
Right.
give you a better idea of what you might be in for.
Right.
And I still think, you know, sooner or later, we've got to find a way, and hopefully this opens the door to talking with them. And I hope they understand that when we ask them to come to our meetings, it's because we have to have our meetings in public. We'd love to go there and have the meeting when they invite us, but we are not allowed to do it. So I want to make sure the public understands. We still want to have a meeting with them. We're still hoping that someday they'll feel comfortable coming here. It's not to take action or do anything, but it's to be able to discuss these things and some ideas, and really address the other concern that we haven't addressed yet is if there's something we can all do jointly to maybe limit the amount of runaways they get, because that's the concern that we've heard from citizens. So I'd still like a chance to have that dialogue with them. And I think because of this, maybe that door will open and we can have that dialogue. But it's something we still really need to try to do as a board. And hopefully one day they'll come in to discuss that, and we can further this discussion. Hopefully with you here as well, and maybe come up with ideas jointly that they haven't considered, maybe that might help minimize you know, how many run away on them, or how long they're gone or something. And I'd still like to get that addressed, but I'm very happy to see this part's been implemented. It's a good step.
I do know that when I did speak to Joe Allred on the phone, it was sometime last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, later in the week, he did mention something about he's amenable to coming to the board and having those type of discussions, as long as the concept and understanding. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. This is more of me getting the impression of what he said. So I'm not saying this is what he told me. But I think the idea was, as long as it's not have someone to throw darts at, that creates a public issue, because sometimes public issues become bigger than the actual details warrant. And so if he's gonna come into a meeting, he's okay to come in, explain what's going on within his legal rights to identify what's going on. But to come to a meeting just to be the target of, you're all that's wrong with the town, is not something that I think even his company would allow him to do. And that's where he's kind of stuck in the middle of, I have no problem talking to you and trying to work towards something. I don't have a problem being in a meeting with you. But the idea is to be progressive and work towards a common goal, not to just throw up the big generic statements and then, so, and I think we're past that, don't get me wrong. I think we're kind of past that moment that we had with the efforts that both Chiefs and Stetson have made. It looks like, and don't get me wrong, and Andrew, our town administrator, has been involved with that as well.
I think there's a lot of misunderstanding.
But it's helping us get past that point. So if we did have another meeting, I don't think we feel like the emotions are as high as they were.
I think there's a lot of misunderstandings where we were frustrated with how many students were running away. And, we really felt they weren't making efforts, and they really felt like their hands are tied. And because of that, we both had misunderstandings and no communication about it. But it'd be a good chance for them to explain to us, help us understand what happens and how it gets to this point. If we get in a better understanding, maybe we can make, more constructive, helpful decisions to them, other than, ours seem like, okay, let's lock them in, and that's not to lock them in, but it's to keep them from getting out into the properties, and obviously that's not what they want to do. But I think they come in and we can communicate about that and find out better what's going on, and because I'm sure they've got to be beginning to understand how it is they're escaping and running away, not escaping, use the wrong wording, and how it is they're running away on them. Whatever they do, I'm sure there's some sort of program or system they do to monitor the students to make sure that they don't lose students.
Yeah.
And the students obviously have found a way around that. And how they are dealing with that, maybe more heads would help them deal with that better and try to close the loopholes so they don't run off on them, make it more difficult for them to do it, something like that. But it'd be good to have a conversation. And yeah, definitely not.
I agree.
We're not looking to point fingers. We're looking to try to, same thing, they, I would assume, want the same thing, to minimize the amount of students that run away on them.
So,
It certainly doesn't help them when they run away. It takes their, assets away as much as ours to go looking for kids, especially if it takes 2 days to find some. So I think we have the same goal in mind.
I agree.
Well said.
And the only other thing I would say there, maybe this is just my personal view, but I think when you look at society right now, because it's so easy for everybody to have a voice and have that voice spread very quickly with social media or anything else, or even just news these days, because it seems like even professional news agencies are big on the headlines. We've gotten to the point where we expect the ideal, not the reality, which means anybody that fails once is a failure, not resolve it, get back on the horse and keep moving on, and it's okay, we don't expect you to be 100% perfect. And we've gotten to the point where I feel like sometimes as a society we expect perfection, and it actually it doesn't mean that you don't have to look at something and still try to make it better. But we go from looking at the action and judging whether that action can be better to judging the person for that action not being perfect. And I think a little of the high emotions involved with this kind of got back to that of there may have been mistakes with staff where someone got out. I mean, everybody works in a profession. I don't think you have any colleagues that are perfect. They make mistakes. You try to work with them, not repeat the mistake. Hopefully the mistake isn't life-threatening. Extreme to very little. Mistake was you forgot to dot the I when you're writing some nice little letter to something. You know what I mean? But we all make mistakes, and sometimes that makes it harder to come to the table and just work on the problem and get it better because it starts becoming personal. Because you're talking about the person now, not the action. And so I think some of what we have been going through started identifying Stetson as a person or an entity rather than the actions that occurred at that time and how can we work with Stetson to, and we're now doing that. We are working with them, they're working with us. And so we're kind of past that, but I think part of what brought it to that level is the goal is always perfection, but if you're gonna let yourself get disappointed because you didn't reach it and then get emotional about that, you're gonna have a hard life to live. You gotta accept that there'll be some mistakes, we'll work together and we'll try to improve it each time.
Anytime a business does something well and satisfies a customer, they have a satisfied customer. They could have 100 satisfied customers, but you get that one customer that's irritated. And nowadays, they go online and post it, repost it, and 1,000 people have that attitude. And this is what we're facing here. You know, they can do so many things right every day, all day. But once one kid, you know, makes a public spectacle, and the wrong people see it and hear about it, and start blasting it on Facebook, it spreads, yeah, like wildfire. And then that one incident becomes the whole of the school rather than just an incident. And unfortunately, we had several, and they were well publicized across Facebook, as we saw, which didn't help the circumstance. But yeah, it's more of a circumstance than the school, I think. And obviously, they're taking steps to try to correct it as well. So hopefully, people start to see that as well and realize that, and kind of maybe cut them some slack here while they're working this out.
Exactly. So I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak on the behalf of the police department and the town on the efforts that, the cooperative efforts both sides are making.
Maybe you don't think it helps to get percentages of what those kids are in categories, but it might just be a good idea to know if, you know, maybe great if it turns out that 60% are green. That would be a fantastic thing to look at. Most of them are just troubled kids with no issues and no violent tendencies, and you know, maybe we find that out, and that'd be good PR. And if we find out the other way around, then we just know and we be quiet about it. You know, it's good to know what we're dealing with.
We'll try to get them.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the subject before we move on?
It's excellent what's going on. Good job.
Exactly. I agree.
What happened, Joanne? Are you sick too? Good.
I'm just coming off of something I forgot to get.
I know, I've been.
Oh, come on. Just coming off of something? That's like saying I'm super strong now because I've developed the immunity of something.
Tomato, potato? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess
Anything
so.
that doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Hear you.
All
All
right.
right.
Have some light reading, I assume?
Like a stereo construction.
Yes.
One sheet.
Well, not that we haven't read before, right?
Make it last. Generous.
All right. Do we really want to, do we want to try to read through this whole document now? Do we want to try to ask them to highlight the changes they've made? Because I assume we've all read.
I think on
Previous
the right
versions.
side now, you should see comments if they were,
Is that correct?
or they did or didn't print, but it's showing like it should print because it's identifying the comments column.
Usually comments are done in red. I don't know if that's a black and white print. Because then that won't show up.
No.
But,
So we do have some track changes that's showing in blue on ours, but either way, it's,
When was that printed, that last draft?
this was
This was-
printed from the draft he emailed us the other day.
And this was based on our discussions at the planning board meeting on November 5th.
Were there some edits you made prior to that, but after the last draft we had had? It looked like you revised maybe a little bit of the, and maybe it's in here and I just blew past it, but on the restrictions, I thought I saw something about 100 to 500 feet rather than just a flat 500 feet.
That was done, and that was,
within the schools and daycares.
yeah.
Yeah. That whole-
Yeah, that's right, and that was,
clause.
I think that was the revision October 30th, but I don't know if,
You
Because you had the next meeting planned, so
Right.
we were waiting on
Right.
you to get through that meeting
Right.
before, to make
Okay.
sure there was a final version.
All right.
Maybe some of those changes didn't track, but maybe we can just go
Yeah,
over
that's
some
it.
of those.
Yeah, that's it.
John gave you some tissues.
What?
John gave you some tissues, right?
No, I'm all right.
Okay. Okay. So what I'd like to do probably is try to focus on a couple of those, and if you guys could think of something that may have been changed between the 30th and the 5th that might not show up in here,
Okay.
just call it out if you remember. I don't think there's anything probably significant that's like, oh, I wish I had talked about, but, because if I go through this, it looks like that is the first one we're seeing. On the track changes is getting to the 100 to 500, breaking it up into the two sections.
Right. And-
Section 1 is the 500 flat.
And the reason for that, Matt, there's locations around town in the commercial areas, here and in South Barre. And the 500 feet was something we had settled on quite a while back. And then people came in and said, hey, you know, you're taking out a lot of places that might be a good place for this. So we talked to Jim Baird about it. We said, well, can we do this in a flexible manner? Can we say, let's make it 100 to 500 feet, and then we can apply it on a case-by-case basis? And he said, sure, you can do that.
Okay.
Another thing that we put in here, and this again was based on a discussion with Jim Baird, was being able to waive some of these requirements. You know, if there's something that we've got in here, and just for a particular application or a particular location, it just doesn't make any sense, we can waive it. And he said, yeah, you guys have the authority, you can do that.
Okay.
So we put that in as well.
All right.
To give it, you know, you can't make this thing like it's not ever gonna be one size fits all. And there's always gonna be some extenuating circumstances in a particular location where you say, well, this doesn't quite fit in with what we said. So if we have the ability to waive it, we thought that would.
The way it reads is ambiguous, and it's not right. So that'll make it, that'll tighten it up.
What section's that?
They shall be, it said they shall not be in 1 to 500 feet, that means in 1 to 500 feet, you can't have them. They shall be a minimum of 1 to 500
Well,
feet.
within the range.
So they shall be a minimum distance of 1 to 500 feet from these things.
Minimum 100, but
Minimum
up to a
distance to be
maximum
turned,
of
to
500.
exact to be determined. See, that tells you the minimum distance is at least 100 to 500 minimum. The way it's written is it says, the only place you can't have them is 1 to 500, but you can have 90 feet from,
Yeah.
or 501, but you can't have them between 1 and 5, the way it's written. So it's just
That's
a,
right.
just a quick.
Good catch.
And so we've dropped off on us putting that in our host agreement, are we still gonna list that?
Okay, do we have an extra draft floating around or something?
What?
Of what we're looking at the marijuana?
Is that all right, guys?
I have one that doesn't show track changes, but there's definitely the draft
This is
that,
fine, this is fine.
I think that might even have our draft in it too, right? That was the big package you stapled
I
together.
didn't
I can get it
include
on my
our
phone, it's
draft
not
in this one.
I'm just.
I'm asserting the attorneys will read it too, so I don't.
Oh,
have to go
okay,
through
so
all that to
that's
look for
just-
stuff like
It's
that.
just the zoning.
Theirs,
I figured
the
you guys
original.
set
Enough.
what ours were.
Oh, yeah.
But I can.
Because the way it's written,
Get another copy.
the only place you can't
No,
have is
I meant
100 to
the-
500, but you could have a 50, the way that
Okay,
it's written.
I am fine with what ours was, I just wasn't sure.
Okay, good, yeah.
So that's just this little, and if you guys, if that fits that way and you guys set the distance, then we don't have to in the host agreement, and that's fine, it's fine with me. Which means we can pull it back out of the host, out of the zoning, out of the bylaws. And just pull the distances out, because you guys, that's all, there's no other facilities not listed there, right?
All right, so we'll pull
Is
the
it-
distances.
Yeah, that's all the places we cared about for location, right? So we can pull them all out of our,
I believe
or
so.
there's some, I think that's all we're concerned of. If there's more, we'd have to
Yeah.
consider them, but.
Okay, I didn't think that there were.
I don't
I'll
think
double
so.
check,
I think
just
that-
because
I
I know
think
that we
that's
were
a-
trying to keep it away from site.
Yeah, and that'll swipe a whole section out of ours, because now that gives them some wiggle room, the same thing we'd have to do, so as long as it's established.
Yeah, and remember, because this is a zoning bylaw, it's gotta go to the state, and the state's gonna review it against their regulations, and
Right.
if there's something they don't like, then they'll come back and say, we don't like this, so change it.
Well, we had left the minimum in for some things. This gives you the ability to pull it on those, and the state might not like that.
Yeah, they might not.
So you might still have to stay a minimum of 500 feet from these. Like, we were gonna say 500 feet from the school or a preschool, and then the following distances will be considered in the host agreement. But we could say it'll be 500 feet from the school or preschool, and then the following must be between, a minimum of 1 to 500 feet, and to be determined later. So you can still make that separation and make a couple things, minimum distance 500, make it rigid, because I think, my guess would be ahead of time, the state's gonna kick it back for schools, that you gotta be 500 feet from schools, and you're not gonna be allowed to make that shorter.
Yeah, there's
So
this K through 12.
Right, and since we're allowing that we can now say we can be within 100 feet of a kindergarten, the state may say, no, you may not, and they may gig that for that. So we might wanna put schools, minimum distance of 500 feet from K to 12, or any similar age-wise educational facilities. Leave that at 500,
See,
and then continue the rest.
There's generally states that, but they didn't specifically say the word kindergarten.
They just
But
said
the preparatory school, I don't know, is that,
It's-
It's K through 12.
Prep schools are still-
no, I mean, your bylaw,
Oh.
1A, where it has to be 500, speaks to a public or private elementary school, middle school, secondary school, preparatory school, licensed daycare center, or other facility which children commonly congregate, which, that part right there probably classifies as kindergarten. I mean, you could always pull that into your interpretation of someone.
Put kindergarten in here. Yeah.
That's your preference. I'm just saying that,
Oh, yeah, so it is already separate, you're right. I'm misreading.
if you, in my opinion, I don't want to ask you to change that. I just want you, if you feel you're comfortable with the way it's written, it's not something to bring up. I just was trying to clarify with Greg.
Right, it is separate, but you could add.
That was the 500
Could just add
minimum, no matter
preschool to
what
that,
section,
yeah.
not the,
Yeah, let's
You could
just
say
add that in here.
preschool, elementary, middle, and that preschool will cover us
hmm.
right up through kindergarten. So, public or private, preschool, elementary, middle. So that keeps all those at 500 feet. So that keeps education at 5 already, then it gives the other ones with the varying distance.
Yep.
I was just looking at them quickly and thinking, oh, I'll lump in there together. I wasn't reading the whole thing.
One thing I was noting, on D, or section D2, I don't know if that's something that the planning board wants to keep in your regulations, just keeping that operational premises between 8 PM and 8 AM, or the 8 PM and 8 AM, setting the time. Just, I don't know if that's something that we want to keep on the Board of Selectmen as far as saying this, the hours of operation shall be set by the Board of Selectmen.
Which section?
Section
D,
D2.
use regulations.
About the fourth page.
It's D2.
Two pages ahead of what we were just looking at.
Okay, right. That, like, more consistent, like alcohol licenses, that's something our board writes into the
Okay.
licenses, your hours of operation.
Yes, the reason this was in here is in one of the two public meetings that we had where we talked about marijuana, a lot of people got up and said they didn't want to see a place that was open until midnight. You know, that they were very concerned about that. They were concerned about, midnight traffic and all that kind of stuff.
Understandable, but if that's something we address, we can do the hours in the business. If that's something you address, you gotta
And the
pick,
license?
you gotta pick a zone. So commercial zones can't operate after midnight, or, you know what I mean? You're gonna have to pick a zone and zone it, which is not the intent. The intent is to get this type of business. If we fall it under our license, we can restrict that business hours of operation without affecting a whole zone.
It says scalpel versus a sledgehammer.
Right.
It also allows you to be more specific to specific business
Types of
types by
businesses.
allowing us to do it versus you.
So I agree, I'd like to see that come out of there, and we've already got that in ours.
Right, 24.
And
Address it.
I would suggest for us, it probably would be more specific to retail and delivery,
Right.
not cultivation. Depending on that can be site-specific discussions, because if they're in a completely enclosed building,
You're not
Well, that can hit
it's
the
just
host.
somebody taking advantage of 3 shifts.
But all these things are gonna hit the host agreement, which you are gonna be in on approving with us, so that you're still gonna have say on those when we put them in.
If
so-
you're interested.
Well, that was our intent.
I mean, that's our draft, but I-
No, we are interested.
That's our intent,
Okay.
to have you all vote with us as a majority total on the host agreement. Not each board separately, but a majority of the collective that come to the meeting. So you'll still have say on the hours, and we can still make that specific for, you know, a grow facility versus a lab versus a retail sale versus, you know.
Yeah, a sales place, people coming and going.
Right.
Testing lab.
And if somebody has a, you know, it gives us, we can go piece by piece. If we put it in the zoning end, it's just, it's got to be too large, too broad a stroke and cover any industry in that zone. To do it legally with zoning, it's gotta fit a zone, so.
Question is, and this is only me wondering how the state may review it, because they are talking about guidelines should be very similar to alcohol establishments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Forcing a marijuana retailer to close before you would force a local bar to close might not actually fit within that position of the state.
Liquor store, not bar,
Yeah, liquor store.
because you can't consume on premises like a bar, so. A liquor store, a package store where you go buy it,
Look, I think.
is 10, so we should have this the same hours. If someone can go
Okay.
buy and drink it and consume on site, we're not having on-site consumption, so we're safe,
All right.
I think. My opinion.
I'd rather somebody be able to go buy it and not drink it on site and drive home than actually someone go to a bar, get drunk and drive home.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying, and we'll leave it at that.
We're not going more strict than their alcohol.
Yeah.
I have no problem in taking this out and letting that be in the host community agreement, just with the understanding that it's not totally my decision. I got to get planning board
Right.
consensus on this. Now, we have a planning board meeting tomorrow night.
But once
so-
again, if you stick an hour restriction on them and they're next door to an alcohol place, now we gotta shut them down early too.
Right.
So unless your intent is to stop the liquor sales and the beer sales at the same hour, we can't make that zoning law
Right.
unless we hit every business in that zone.
And somebody would complain and say that we're trying to put like a moratorium on them for,
But if it's in the host agreement, we all get to have say on it, we can agree on the hours, and it's still gonna have the same teeth. It doesn't hit every business in town for it.
Andrew, we don't, as far as you understand, we just need to double check. We don't have a bylaw limiting the hours of alcohol establishments, right? We just do it by licensing?
Right, that's the state that sets the limits on the hours. So.
And the
usually,
state limit
you
is
know,
just 2 AM and then reopening at no earlier than,
2
right?
AM in a bar, but the Board of Selectmen actually has the authority to set a earlier time.
they
If
do
you
a
so-
permit, right?
Right,
Sometimes
through a
like a New Year's Eve, most places close by 1 in this town.
So that might be
Right.
right.
But permit requests, we can give them a
Special
special
permit.
exemption for that night, or, and the only reason I'm asking is, because I was gonna suggest we could put it in the marijuana licensing general bylaw, the hours of operation for specific types, retail, or, but if we don't have it in a bylaw, it'd probably be better to leave it to the licensing policy and therefore the host community agreement or similar.
I think a lot of this is properly addressed in the host agreement, because each of these businesses is gonna be unique. Even a retail sale, somebody may wanna sell marijuana smokable and paraphernalia to smoke it with. Someone else might wanna have edibles, and, you know, we might want that to be operating at a different hour than the smokable things. And depending on what type of business, you know, if they're running a lab or if they're running a grow, all the hours are gonna wanna be different, and I think
Under the operation.
best of best.
Under the operational requirements, under our proposed bylaws, it does say, the hours of operation for marijuana establishment shall be set by the Board of Selectmen. The licensee shall not change his hours of operation without the board's approval. So
Now, is that
Okay.
under the license agreement, under the host agreement, or doesn't it specify?
under the licensing.
Okay.
Well, we can hit it in both. We can make it redundant, as long as we match in the license what we say in the host.
I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
in the licensing, it gives you
We
that
wouldn't
opportunity
even
that once
necessarily
you-
need to do it in the host community agreement, because they just know, unless they ask.
If you guys are having issues too, it gives you that opportunity once a year of reviewing that and changing the hours. And you guys see an issue of saying, okay,
I gotcha.
hey.
Because it's an
10
annual
o'clock is
license
just too
renewal,
late.
so each time we get a chance to revisit.
Yeah, revisit
And if it's in the
licensing.
host community agreement, you're stuck with it for the entirety rather than just
Well, for the
license
3-year agreement, if that's what it
Well,
runs
if we
for.
get complaints
Right.
that
5-year.
places staying open later, because a lot of, you know, even with bars, I mean, sometimes they'd stay after hours and you'd get complaints, and deal with it.
Agreed.
Well, either way, we're gonna have to
Temporarily
discuss
reduce you
it.
to 8 o'clock close until you can prove you're better at it, and then maybe next year we'll revisit. I mean, I got you.
The state hasn't agreed to, or hasn't made any immediate provisions to say that after the initial HCA, you have to have a successor too. So they might come back and throw that whole provision out and say, well, you only get one shot to pilot. They might update it to say, yeah, okay, you need a successor agreement.
Yeah, they won't let that happen. In 5 years, they'll be making too much money to fight the industry, and they'll say, oh, no more HCA required.
Right, and they're still.
We know how the state works.
But the state's also still working with their initial licensings that they're starting to hand out, and they're gonna deal with these agreements coming in. They're very busy with all this to worry about the furthering that law at this point. And I'm sure in a couple of years, when this stuff is settled down and running more smoothly, then they'll further address future agreements and how it's gonna be handled, and maybe adjust tax rates or whatever else they can. But I'm sure there'll be revision, but not for, I would guess, 2 or 3 years till this stuff is running smoothly and a lot of licenses are handed out.
Gotcha. I only had one more. Well, I'll hit it as we go. So he brought up D2. I'm in E4 allowed uses.
E4,
Yes, we're at the outdoor cultivation and indoor cultivation.
Right.
And under outdoor cultivation, one, you do reference R80 is the only place where it can occur, but then you also follow up saying it's the only allowed use in R80. And it just, if I read it right, it's outdoor cultivation is allowed on existing farmland in R80 residential and industrial. I'm sorry, you said it could be in both. No other types of marijuana establishments are allowed in areas zoned R80. And one thing I was just trying to ask or think about here, and again, whether you waive it or clarify it, depending on site-specific reviews, that might be kind of the avenue it would be. But if somebody came to you and said, I'm planning an outdoor, but after talking to some developer, talking to so-and-so, they tell me that if I were to able to create an indoor on the same footprint, I might be able to get better production because of weather, or better control of the product because I'm looking for certain hybrid breeds or whatever they do. I don't know. In other words, bees can't come in and screw up my plants. I don't know enough about that stuff. Do you think this prevents them from coming to you, or do you think having that right to waive allows someone to still come to you and say, I might be able to propose something that still fits the request and not seem like because we still only have a limited number of licenses, so it's like if you give it, it's not like 40 farms are gonna want the same thing. So maybe that's more of, it's covered by your ability to waive?
I think that might be a provision that would be waived, and that cap of outdoor cultivation is limited to 3 projects total. So that might be something that we would exercise the waiving provision on.
Well, that would eventually, if I'm correct, that actually become an indoor? Same thing, though, I think there's
Yeah,
3.
It's 3 and 3, makes
Okay.
the same difference.
Where does that, where do we specify that?
on E,
Which part?
The 3 and 3.
That actually is in licensing, and I was gonna recommend you take that out because it's redundant. We're saying the exact same thing in ours. So if it ever gets changed, we gotta revise 2 bylaws and remember all the cross-referencing.
Like here on the bottom.
Where? E?
Storage.
Section 15, 16, and 17, or
So
paragraphs
is there
15,
a
16,
reason you want to
17.
exclude, is there a reason you want to
G.
exclude labs from being an R80?
I'm sorry. G,
Like
restrictions
if you had
and
a
prohibitions,
processing-
go to.
A process in a laboratory would be indoors,
E.
Oh, yeah.
and if it's on 20 acres, is it better suited in R80 than industrial? I don't understand pulling the process in place out of R80, saying it has to be industrial.
Yeah, 3 door.
I don't understand the
That's what I'm
benefits.
saying, maybe somebody could present an argument that makes sense and covers the general reasons why they started with nothing but that in R80. if someone presents a good argument of why this might be a better location for indoor, by allowing them to waive it, it gives them the ability to at least consider the request.
The reason that's in there is there was a lot of opposition, both in the public meetings and on the planning board side partly too, of allowing what were really commercial type operations in the R80 zoning.
Understood.
But you know, we had to sell the part about outdoor cultivation because we don't have agricultural zoning in Barre. So
Right.
agricultural is R80, so you can't, you know,
Right.
it's whatever's allowed.
And then whether it's indoor or outdoor really
Yeah,
doesn't
you
matter.
didn't have
But if you go to
R80
a
commercial, which
processing
is-
plant, now we are industrial. So,
Right.
Okay, that I
That was
understand.
why that was.
That's what I was asking, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
Exactly, and it's understood, because like you said, agriculture would be your R80 commercial concept, because it's business profiting from what you do with your land, generally, right?
While
Okay.
we're on that theme, can we jump forward to where we can't disturb prime agricultural soils or unfragmented open land?
How far ahead's that?
So we've been, I think it's on G5, I think?
Someday we're gonna get page numbers on this stuff, but we just haven't technologically.
This is
advanced
G,
that
so
far
it's in this.
Hey, we got comments,
So
we're
it's in this
doing
page,
good, we're
we
getting
made the change in
there.
it, right?
It is
We've
Yeah,
nailed the
yeah,
comments
sorry,
thing.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, so it's just the next page.
Yeah, just next page.
All right, okay. I don't want to jump too far ahead. If we're going to go through, we may as well go through
Yeah,
ahead as we
it
go.
was
but
mostly
sure.
while we're on that theme of unfragmented RED.
I can't read that, it was just.
Can you
The G5.
define for me what unfragmented open land means?
Meadows.
Huh?
Meadows,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, just grass or forest.
So
like-
like farmland that got left that way for 50, 60 years and just became a meadow?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or it's something that's just undisturbed young growth forest. I think if you cleared it 50
Okay.
years ago, but it's since kind of rebounded a bit back, and it looks a little bit more wild and untamed, but it's not really old growth by any stretch. But those are the areas that would be the most targeted by outdoor cultivation, because they have the richest soils from that 50 years of grow back. So if we're
Okay.
restricting them to R80, they're more likely to be completely wooded areas and more likely to be cleared for creating your outdoor grow operation. So if we're gonna restrict them to R80, but say then you can't use your unfragmented open land that have the best quality soils, it's kind of a catch-22. It won't work either way.
There's a part of me that agrees with that.
I'm just thinking from an economic development point of view, we're already pushing them into one
What,
niche of zoning.
in regards to the open space and recreation plan, the master plan, or a community development plan, how much power does the town have in telling someone else, without going through a bylaw approval by the town vote, that what they're allowed to do with that unfragmented land? So just putting it in the plan and identifying it as a priority, the way it's getting into the bylaw is actually this paragraph.
Yeah,
Right.
So you're allowing a policy to be pulled into that can then be adjusted without
Yeah.
town
It's
vote.
like a-
And also too, we don't have a master plan now.
Right.
We ought to. We don't have a community development plan.
We ought to.
But we talked to Jim Baird about this. This item came out of a marijuana bylaw from another town. But Jim said, well, you may have those one day. You know, you may have, we may develop a master plan in Barre one day, or a community development plan. And when we do, it'll have, you know, it'll have restrictions and overlays about what. So he said, why don't you put this in here? Now, the unfragmented open land, we don't really have a definition of that in here, what that means.
Right.
If a developer finds that as a point of contention, it might become a point of litigation in the future. That's something.
You know, again, that's something that,
Is this going to affect, say, let's say somebody was going to come build, which would be great for our town, a small housing development someplace, and put up 10 homes, but now it's on fragmented land. Are we going to let him build on it?
It
And
might be-
what's the purpose? Are we protecting the soil, or are we just trying to limit the growth? So I think we need to look at what we're really trying to do with that bylaw. If we're trying to protect the soil, That's gotta go across the board to everybody.
Yeah, you'd be digging into chapter 140 challenges, which are wetlands and conservation issues.
Each one of these
Unfragmented
plans could
doesn't
call
mean
out
wetlands.
saving the land
Natural
for
resources.
open space and recreation, which means it could be just leave it alone. We like someone to be able to walk through the meadow. The master plan and community development plan could actually be saying, hold this for future development.
That's true.
This is where we expect residential growth to go. So I see what they're saying, but I guess my concern right now is it could also, you might need to explicitly identify unfragmented,
I have it right.
unfragmented land that might be in R80, because we might have industrial that could fit that, because it just hasn't been used.
I have it right here. Large blocks of undeveloped land are an important natural resource in a developing region. Unfragmented blocks of habitat are large pieces of land which are not bisected by a maintained class 5 or better road. Typically, there are no houses, businesses, or other human habitation. These areas can include forest, meadows, open water, wetlands, and agricultural fields.
Okay, this is very specific, then, the definition is specific to natural habitat
Yeah.
protection.
Include a citation.
Maybe what we ought to do is, let's take out this unfragmented open land, since we don't have a definition of it, and just say, not allowed, or in any areas identified in a priority in these other reports, or these other plans. And then if, when we do those plans, assuming we ever get them done, then whatever's gonna be protected is gonna be protected.
Any areas of important environmental significance.
Yeah.
My only reservation to that is putting that in here when it refers to nothing. We can always amend that bylaw later and add it when we make the plans. So it's, you know, if you're gonna make the plans, then we make the plans and pass that bylaw with an amendment to this at the same time, rather than put an empty space of language in here.
Here's my concern with it. This is only specific to marijuana use. It has nothing to do with any other industrial application, you are only limiting that business from affecting your town plans and doing nothing with any other activity on that site that can have the same detrimental effect to those plans.
To habitat and wildlife.
So this is
What the-
specific to AMUs, and from my opinion, if I was the Attorney General, I'd say, scratch that paragraph. This is business specific, you're intending to keep them from developing like anybody else in the same zones. And because we didn't do an overlay zone that is specific to a business entity, then you're kind of saying you can do commercial with a couple of these extras, but all of a sudden this business can't affect a town plan, but another one could. That could be just as nasty to the town, depending on what it is.
Yeah, I see what you
So
mean.
once again, without needing to put it in here, if you do with the master plan later and you define that you're not gonna have development of these protected lands and fragmented lands across the board for the zone, then we're protecting the habitat in the lands, unless you can go a case-by-case impact study with the planning board to decide what you're gonna allow. Then it doesn't have to be here and specify AMUs.
And if a certain portion of the parcel is designated as of, heightened environmental significance, then there should be something.
Right, and if you make that master plan, hopefully in the future soon, that can identify this for everything. So it doesn't just stop this, it stops it in general. So there may be other things we want to stop there too. It gives a broader stroke, and this is the case where the broader stroke is better. The specific is gonna get us in trouble.
It was just a thought. I mean, I'm not asking you to take it out either.
No, but this is
it's
why
worth
it's fun to have
talking.
more heads bounce off it. You guys do it so far, then you get a different view of it, and you may rethink it, you may not, I don't know. But that's,
We can go back to where we were, didn't want to completely get us into the weeds.
yeah, that's fine, that's not, I think we're.
I would go to number 6 though and ask you, do you also consider outdoor cultivation one of those AMUs that shouldn't land on prime agricultural land because it supposedly is good for the land?
Yeah, no, actually, that, if you were doing outdoor cultivation, that's probably where you'd want it though.
Yeah, and so I don't know if this is something where you'd
And
add a
it's
little note.
agriculture. I mean,
Outdoor cultivation would be considered an exception, and that way it leaves it as considered?
That
Yeah.
could end up actually hurting us if it negatively impacts their ability to produce their product. We get a percentage of that product's value. So it actually kind of bites ourselves if
Just-
we limit their
just
ability
to-
to effectively create.
Well,
Yeah.
there's also the fact that agricultural land over the years that may have been treated with pesticides and everything else, marijuana is a known sponge plant. It
That's
may-
my understanding, yeah.
It may never pass the testing part after the fact of it being grown. I would imagine they would have to do all kinds of soil samples in that.
Because whatever's in there is gonna be in the product.
Absolutely.
And then you encourage them to do it anyway, because it's cleaning the soil while they keep failing crop after crop.
They'll
Oh,
do it.
I didn't know.
They'll do it, don't worry.
But
They'll do it.
either way, this.
No, I
that's
agree,
their
but you're
business.
right,
They
I'd heard
know
about
what they're
Well,
planning.
hemp
right.
is
I think
great for
farm
like cleaning up.
commercially, They'll do the soil testing.
And they could use hemp for
It would
that
be
too,
silly
they could
not
do
to.
that as an
That's the
agricultural
cheapest
source,
part of
and
the
then
whole
it's,
process.
they don't care about the quality of the marijuana, you're growing the
It
hemp.
really is.
Yeah, depending on what the hemp is used for, it could be just
So
as,
what you're saying is that we
Companies will
would
pay
make an
for it.
exemption for outdoor cultivation.
What?
for the-
or even just add
This-
to
No,
it,
they're gonna-
outdoor cultivation would be considered
UMass
as
doesn't do that.
an exemption to this.
Nobody knows.
But once
that.
again,
Yeah.
the-
And like you said, that allows you,
But then if you strike that part from this
Should
period,
set
because
that
it,
open.
the only thing that does is
Soil
stop
test
that.
it.
If you take it out, it doesn't stop it. And it goes back to a master plan,
I thought they
you know,
were.
saying we're gonna, we're gonna, now here's a case of growing
No, yeah,
marijuana
yeah,
there, I don't think it's a bad thing. But putting up a
Can't do
condo
it all
complex in
across
prime
the
agricultural land might not be in our best interest, since we're still a farming community, and it's,
Right.
you know,
Well, we've ended up with solar farms in prime agriculture.
that's happening too with,
that's something you're cleaning up now,
Getting
right? With that
addressed
whole
too,
new
but I mean-
bylaw and the previous, finally, none of it until we figure it out.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is in limited cases where, we've got farmers that own hundreds of acres of land.
thousands, yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense to put solar on there in part of it, but it's all zoned R80. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way to open that up without opening the gates all the way.
Yeah.
Open it up on a limited basis and see how it works. That's
Yeah,
what we're
exactly.
trying to do.
It's really tough threading a needle. And
Yeah.
I'm personally really glad.
Do you think we're gonna have something ready for the warrant with that? That's.
With solar?
Yep.
It's ready.
Yeah.
So it's ready to let people look at it, because we're hoping to
Oh,
get
yeah.
things out to the public with a week or two,
Yeah.
hopefully two, to view this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming down fast. Oh, good.
After your meeting tomorrow, whatever you finalize, just forward it to me and I'll get it out there, because I wanted to do all the marijuana ones all at once.
Yeah.
That way it wasn't,
Okay.
oh, here's the
The solar
the
bylaws
sol-
is
We're
here's
talking
the
like-
selectmen one, and then a week later, here's the.
A week from now is our 2 week out mark, where we really want to have everything publicized so people can read it.
Yeah, we'll have it.
I anticipate a good showing at this meeting. I think people are interested in this and are passionate about this more. I think we're gonna have a good turnout.
The solar bylaw document that we've constructed, I'm personally very, very happy and proud of. I think it's an excellent compromise. It's very pragmatic. It's not overly punitive either.
Probably hasn't changed much from what I saw a month or so ago when I came to the meeting.
Yeah.
I liked it then.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, they were both really close. I thought we'd get there.
Yeah.
All right.
And,
So the only next question I had in section G, I believe, came back down to the licensing thing we just mentioned. Item 15, 16, and 17, just kind of remove that from your bylaw.
please.
I believe we have the exact same wording in ours, so.
Yeah, and even ours is a little different because we round up to the fraction, theirs doesn't address it, so technically.
Okay,
the
right.
boards has a higher threshold, so it'd be better if we just had that in one.
So use yours instead of ours, so.
Right. If your 20% comes out to
Yeah.
be 2.1 facilities, then by law you need 3, and yours doesn't allow that. Ours will.
Well, theirs just doesn't define it.
You
but
have
the-
to be a
the-
minimum of 20%, so
The,
if you're 20.2, we have to allow an extra facility.
the real reason
By
I'm
state law.
mentioning taking it out of yours is it's redundant.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do go to change it anytime in the future,
That's
we've got to look at both, remember both laws have it.
Oh,
And 20 years from now, we'll be lucky if we still have Ellen and Jim Baird telling us that
But I-
these two laws need to be remembered, that they're tied together through that, because
I
it shouldn't.
also think-
Licensing isn't really a zoning law.
Right. The number of facilities isn't so much as the zoning to say, okay, in our R15, we're gonna allow, 385 houses in town and that's it. That's not really, I think, the place of the zone. The place of the zone is to say, this is an R15, here's the scope, here's the property lot sizes and setbacks, it applies to everybody. Then it's up to the selectmen to propose to the town to vote on, how many homes do we wanna have in town? Do we wanna limit homes? Do we wanna limit our growth or that would be, I think, more on our end anyway. So to say the number of businesses should probably go through us.
So what we're saying
Anyways.
is 15 is gonna be covered in your licensing bylaw?
Yes, it is.
15, 16, and 17, all three of them.
So you're gonna limit it to 3 in there, or?
Yeah, we took almost word for word.
Oh, okay.
And then we just
The
said
only
rounding
thing
up.
that on 15 we revised was if you ran into a fractional division of 20%, it rounds up. Which means if for some reason the town got one more package store, because right now we have 5, 20% is one license. If someone opened up another package store, that technically rolls in 20% rounded up means a second marijuana buy.
Does the state reg
Retailer could be a,
State reg says rounded up?
It says minimum of
it doesn't,
20%.
it says 20% is your lowest.
Okay.
But if you have what's 20% of 6?
Yeah.
It's 1 point something. Well,
So the state minimum is 1.2 stores.
how, you can't reach the minimum by only giving a .2 license to someone. So you have to give them a second license to reach the minimum of 20%.
So basically.
That's how we interpreted the state's position.
0 to 5 alcohol
Bills all
stores,
the time.
0 to 5 alcohol is one marijuana. 6 through 10 is 2. 11 through 15 is 3. But without spelling it out by the numbers, we just say rounding up above the percentage.
And if we reach 3 retails in this town, this is a whole different town.
Yeah.
To have 15 package stores, so.
Then we need our package store fees to be more money per.
That brings me
Live
to
it
a
off.
question. I don't want to get too technical here. We refer to a package store as a beer, wine, and hard liquor. There are places in town that sell beer and wine. Are they considered a package store?
Yes, any place that sells
Every-
alcohol
Period.
for off-site consumption.
For off-site
Right.
consumption.
The on-site
Off-site
consumption.
only.
On-site consumption doesn't count,
If
so.
I'm- Now, if I'm correct, like Stone Cow Brewery, even though you can buy a 6-pack for a growler to
They
go,
do have
it's an
consumption.
on-site license.
But they have but there is a section 19 license, not a section 15 license. It's by the
Oh, it's-
section 15 license only.
Okay.
So, section
So that
19
doesn't even,
So-
so I was,
When it's a
wanted to
not
figure out how
for
that was
consu-
defined.
We have to match a not for consumption licensing.
Okay.
So that pulls out the
Yeah.
mill and the Chinese food and Picasso's and those things are pulled
I
out.
always wondered about that.
Yeah.
So you've got uptown and.
But you're
downtown
right, there
liquor
were
store,
questions that came up, I
convenience
recall.
store.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. Again, I gotta take this back to the planning board and get consensus.
Yeah.
And then my belief is, once again, if you try to limit the number of facilities in the zoning bylaw, the state will probably kick it.
We got a quorum right now.
No, he can't vote.
Yeah.
But we also want this, we want to give this the
Well,
best
you
chance.
can
That's
when
why
there
we try
isn't
to
a
pull
quorum.
things out and clean up on our end. The more we can pull out, the better chance yours has of going through the state clean without getting gigs. I think ours
None.
stands a reasonable chance as it is. And we're going to find out very soon. If we have to make some modifications, we make them, but I think we're going to be pretty clean. Like I said, it's making sure the schools are all stipulated from K through or preschool up at 500 feet, and then giving yourself the wiggle room in the other ones. I think that's gonna work.
Well, the state could pull that out too.
They could say 500 from everything, and that's fine.
Well, but theirs just says schools.
Yep.
You know, so
They
some of
may
the
pull
other-
it, but I would doubt it. I think that's a reasonable thing to say
I
that,
don't know. Doug and I were at a meeting with the CCC up at Holy Cross, and we brought the question up because mirrored off of the ABC's alcohol regulations, their regulations are specific with K through 12, preschool, any place like next door here at the Congregational Church, they used to have a preschool class there. When the old Colonel Isaac Barre was applying with the ABC to have that restaurant and bar on the common, it had to be so many feet away from St. Joseph's and that church and school there. And we asked, why did the CCC remove preschool? They wouldn't answer.
Probably because
They
they lose other
refuse to
buildings.
answer.
Well, if they do
Too
gig
young to
that,
be impressionable.
if they do gig that, a way to possibly avert that
Gotta
would
be
be
a
to say
reason.
that,
Yeah.
that your board has shall determine case by case the proximity, so they will be a minimum of 1 to 500 feet from the following things, case by case. And they shall be required to follow the distance as the local alcohol stores.
Right, and if you don't put it.
So we're gonna go case by case, keeping the distance the alcohol stores are, so they won't be any further.
Right.
Right.
You know what I mean? So if you say it's case by case, however, we're restricted to matching the distance of our alcohol sales stores, then it might go through.
That's right, we had to hold a hearing on
Oh,
the
yeah.
one with St. Joseph's Church.
Oh,
to
yeah.
So
determine
that
if
line
it's not
might,
an
that line might
adverse
aid you
impact.
beforehand, because we're not allowed to restrict
Yeah.
further than it, so just say it outright
I went
in your
to watch.
I
bylaw.
did too.
Minimum 1 to 500,
marketplace?
No, trying to analyze it.
case by case.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to
But
go in and
we shall
testify.
determine that
I went and
distance
testified on
by
behalf of
looking at the
Gary
distance in
Not
conforming
Matt
to the
Conlon.
distance of the local alcohol,
Okay.
not for consumption alcohol establishments.
But I figure.
And you can just say this, not the in parentheses, but part of the law, and they shall conform to the current distances of the alcohol
If we
establishments.
don't put it in front of.
Yes,
the,
Dennis.
Then there's less chance they kick it back.
If we don't put it in front of the AG's office, the answer's automatically no. So the worst they can do is say, you can't do that. But if we don't put it in front of them, they may say yes. If we don't put
Right.
it in front of them, the answer automatically is no.
Right. Gotcha.
What would that do to, does that have to be, that doesn't have to be done before our town meeting, right? That decision would be later down the road.
Comes after, and I think it's like a line item veto they have the right to, so they can scratch out specific sentences or paragraphs and everything else stays.
Everything else.
That's right, everything else is still in order, except for whatever they say.
Nice.
But if we want to try to redo that, then it's going
Unless
to
they
have
say
to
it's
be
such a mess,
reapproved
none
at
of
the
it
town
passes.
meeting
Yeah.
to go back.
Start
So
over, bad
I don't
job.
think we have the right to just change it.
Come back again. Nice
No, we
try.
don't.
We'd have to change the language and put it back
Yeah,
into
we'd
the
have to
town.
go
So
back and vote on everything else, so.
that's food for thought. Maybe add in that will conform to the, specifically, we hold the right to determine those distances on a case-by-case basis, and they shall be held in the same conformity and distance as current alcohol stores.
Here's another question.
Alcohol sales not for consumption.
We have a new dance studio on the common that is for minors. Would that be considered a school?
Which one is that? Is that
That's
the
next to
Carmel
the-
one?
I don't know what the. name
PNF
of it-
Auto now?
No.
Oh, okay.
There is something in there.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I'm not sure what it is. It's over by the old St. Joseph's Rectory.
It's a dance
Next door.
studio.
Phelan's
Step
old
dance
insurance
studio.
office.
They moved up to the common?
Yeah,
Weren't they,
it's-
they were down right by the bank?
Right, but she
Okay.
bought the building over here.
Yeah, it's
She lives
Phelan's
in
old
there.
insurance building,
Okay.
next to the former St. Joseph's Rectory.
Yeah,
It's
Oh, where
a
Phelan's-
modern-looking building.
Where Valens were.
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm just
I'll figure
curious
it out.
about that.
I don't think so, just because it's not it's probably not registered as an
Education.
educational.
Yeah, the teachers don't need licenses.
Yeah, it's just,
Even if they call it a dance school, it's not an education
Yeah.
facility. It's
That would be one where, well, the planning board would have to just listen to the public comment to see if somebody said this is, and it matters to them. You know, if it's a dance school, kids come, but it's literally in, out, go home, and they're not really hanging out outside.
And once again,
I don't know if the dance studio people would have an interest in coming to you saying this is an issue to me.
if it's 150 feet from the alcohol sales store, then we really shouldn't be able to restrict it from being there within 150 feet of it.
That's what it is on.
And
No, what I'm
and
saying
I'm just saying,
is-
I'm just picking a number, but I'm saying
Oh.
if it should be
It
150
doesn't
feet
necessarily
away
fall
from
in the classification of what you have.
Right.
So it would be a subjective decision based on the actual number of, how often kids are there and what are they doing there, and so, I'd rather leave it to your subjective view. If someone came and said, that's what I wanted to do, you could listen and decide if it's an appropriate location, rather than try to make it too much black and white either way. You know, if it's, because there's gonna be a lot of businesses that might have kids come regularly.
This building, Teen Center.
Right, but even on the corner, when the person opened up the arts teaching or
I don't
whatever,
think that ever opened, but.
well, applied and moved towards that, that could have fit the same,
They do have one already at the listing center for children. Also with the Congregational Church's Boy Scout program. I mean,
Right.
you could nitpick this to death.
that's why I'm saying you gotta be careful, just saying, because kids show up,
Yeah, that's a one.
what are they doing? Are they running around like a
Well, they-
playground where they're outside seeing everything, or are they in the building? Now you decide what is the true potential of influencing them because there's a store next door or
Or a ZBA.
3 doors down that may or may not be selling something that parents aren't approving of. I'm just,
No, I got it.
so
I'll
leave
keep
it to you
circling
guys to
back.
be subjective and listen to the town's voice when someone asks you, can I do this? Or HCA will do the same because it'll
But
come to
I
us
keep-
first.
Keep circling back, Matt, that we can't turn around and say, I know there's a liquor store right next door, but we're not gonna let that be there, because they've been very clear about that restriction. We
That's
can't
what I
restrict
think they
them
should have
further.
put.
Well, I don't disagree. In that particular example, you're right. We'd have to consider
Then that's what I'm
that.
saying, so when back again to the distances, if you make your exceptions that you wanna make to be determined, and you tie it to the alcohol distances to say, you know, we shall not make the distances more restrictive than those of the alcohol stores. If you specify that, so make it clear, it's got a better chance of them letting that go through, so they understand that
Surprised
you're.
the
As long as
state
there's
hasn't
parity
put into some
between the two.
lottery tickets.
As long as they're treated equally. as
Right, it just makes it clear that we wanna pick the zoning, but we're gonna do it by
Sounds
looking
like
at the
something
alcohol
they'd do.
stores.
Wouldn't-
We
Yeah.
wanna
put a slot-
consider the distance to all
and have
these.
slot machines in there,
By
too.
looking how far, the alcohol
All right.
store is 380 feet from the playgrounds,
I
we're gonna
think-
keep the marijuana 380 feet.
Move on from this. I think we've made our point on this one.
So,
The very last comment I have is if you get to the second last page, BB, marijuana retail storefronts allowed in such and, the very last one, number 7. You may want to review that and revise that back to that sex restrictions, prohibitions where you did the 100 to 500. Because this now just says it's 500 flat, but it wasn't one of the 500 flat that you had put into that split section.
Now, you're saying 7 is the last one? I've got others. after
No,
that.
7 on that page.
There's 3 more
You're
on this
right,
page.
there were more, but
It's
I,
the last one on the second to last page.
You know where that came from? That came from the CCC and I believe the city of Cambridge, because they didn't want to create
Districts.
a red light district
Right.
where they push everything into one spot, like that alley will be where they sell marijuana and only in that alley.
right.
Well, for now, it's only gonna be the one anyways.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, do we want the second one in the same area, do we want it to be someplace different? And
Oh, competition too, I mean,
Right.
you don't see package stores next door to each other usually.
Well, right, we have the main liquor store uptown and downtown.
You
so-
could almost say the marketplace and,
Well,
So I don't have a problem with the
Russo's or
500
Dean's
foot
Liquors
minimum
or whoever.
staying, because that makes us go to a different location for it, and
but I understand what you mean. And I would guess most retailers also wouldn't want to be
Wouldn't wanna be
next to each other for the same reason. But because we have very limited number of commercial locations, we don't have a lot of zoning for commercial or industrial compared to our acreage in town. You know, our total space, very little for
Our
these.
storefront inventory is pretty.
So it might not be easy for them to say, yeah, I don't want to be next to them, but I have nowhere else to go. So, and now you're telling me I can't either, when,
But-
and that's why I agree with the 100 to 500, it gives you more of that subjective review again.
Right.
And listening to the town. Maybe the town had one retailer, never had an issue with it, and they say, you know what? Putting them next to each other just helps the police know who to look at. Because now they don't have to back and forth across town to find out it's, I don't know, I mean, so maybe the discussion may at that time, if it's presented, present something where it's like, okay, that makes sense for what, and I don't even want to imagine what would make sense. Let them tell you.
I like the 500. I'd like them to go someplace different.
And that's fine, but
I don't like to see.
why
them too,
mandate it, is my point. Liking it versus mandating it
Because
is a
the
little
state's put
different.
it that way.
Huh?
Isn't the state have it at 500?
No. They talked about it, but they haven't put it in state law requiring it.
They left it to the individual.
All right, then.
So, and I agree that maybe it's not all, there might be a rare case where actually it would make sense not to put them, to put them side by side, but.
Maybe in a congested area like Cambridge, because I remember years ago in Boston, not far off the theater district, you had Chinatown, the theater district, and then you had what was called the combat zone.
Yeah.
Everything there was that,
Right.
See,
and they cleaned that up.
for our perspective, what's in this for us is tax. And if people are walking uptown.
And
to buy-
jobs.
If people are walking uptown to buy marijuana, they're gonna buy marijuana. From this store, side by side, there's nothing in it for us. But if maybe there's another store way over there, and they're not gonna bother coming here, maybe we're gonna get more sales and more tax. And less traffic all the way to the center of town if a place in South Bay. So it might improve our sales and our taxes for us to have, if another facility should open, to do it someplace else. That's the only reason I like having the distance. Side by
Again, look
side,
at what's zoned
there's
and how
nothing in it
far
for
can you
us.
really get away from each other.
There's nothing in it for us if they're side by side.
And I don't recall, I remember back in previous drafts, I'd only bring it up now, is double check your reference to your business commercial zones and your, limited business, and your zoning map to see actually how much fits in the criteria where you say these can fit. Because I thought in the beginning, and this was probably my confusion, not yours, that you identified it only in like business commercial, and that's like a third of the total business commercial, business limited area or something, so you didn't have, it was pretty much, you could put it at the IGA. And then everything else fit in that business limited, not business commercial.
The rest of that plaza's business is business limited, from my recollection.
So I'm trying to remember, but when I remember looking, now the map is hard to read sometimes because the two pinks almost look like the same if you're not right on top of it, so I may not have been reading it right. But I'm just saying, keep that in mind just to see if your reference met what you intended.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe I missed, and if it did, it did. I'm not trying to press it.
Okay, so commercial, business, and business limited.
Yeah. Just to see if saying a retail can only be in one actually fit your original intent.
Right. Okay.
If it did, it did. Again, I'm not,
Okay.
I could see us needing a second permit at some point. I can see someone else will open up beer sales and we'll need a second permit. But I doubt we'd ever get to 3. But to be ready for the 2 should be wise.
Look at the media that place in Leicester has got. Holy.
Cultivation.
the
Yeah,
one thing
cultivate.
is,
56, I think.
Cultivate.
You have to have
we're
to have
not
shuttle
a
services.
center of population where a retail is gonna say, Barry's the place I wanna set up, necessarily because of the proximity of Leicester.
For retail.
Gardner,
Yeah.
is it North Brookfield?
North Brookfield.
That's been kinda open to,
They've been the most.
I'm not saying they're
receptive.
gonna say retail, but I knew one of them down there was more open to the,
The overall climate there is more receptive.
okay. So I'm just saying, with that triangle of potential locations for retail, how many people are gonna say, you know what, we should put another store in Barry? I don't know.
We don't have the tire or the foot traffic to really warrant a level of investment.
I don't know.
I was always surprised that somehow it didn't still fit in
Motorcycle rides in the summer, they
pharmacies
come through here the thousands.
for the
on
medical
weekend.
side. Why does it have to be a whole separate dispensary? They can sell OxyContin, but they can't sell marijuana?
Yeah.
Because it falls through a different regulatory process, and I understand, but it's like, if somebody really wanted the medicine, they should feel very comfortable going to Barry Family Pharmacy and just saying, I'd just like my prescription, and not the whole world has to know they're going to a dispensary versus just getting their medicine. But the state made it so, no, you gotta tell everybody.
You still have a federally banned substance,
Absolutely.
period.
That's exactly
So
what I mean.
you're not gonna take the federally banned substance and put it into a federally regulated pharmaceutical store.
In our public
Depending what the
meetings,
Fed does with that, it could go bad for the store.
in our public meetings, one woman got up and she said, "What are you going to do about the federal regulations? What are you gonna do about that? What are you gonna do about the enforcement of the federal reg?" And I'm sitting thinking, nothing, but that's not the right answer.
we're not-
What do they call that? That's a,
That's a jurisdiction.
Jim McGovern.
Contractor's risk, that's a business entity's risk, not a town's risk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
That's why they're gonna go with putting their monies in credit unions, because they're not federally insured.
Yeah.
Well, again,
There's some credit union in Boston that said they were gonna accept money from the businesses.
I think,
That's their operational risk, that really is
There's
none of our,
nobody
no
else
skin
in
off
your
our back.
guidance.
And they could then go after the whole credit union.
Gardner Financial, GFA,
yes.
So it's-
said that they
it's a very
would-
big risk.
They would lend.
they'll lend. And I heard another one recently, but similar, it's the credit union world that I heard.
But it's a big risk. What they're gonna find is that what they can do is the Fed can't go after the account, but they can go after the whole credit union.
Yeah. But that's their operational risk.
So,
It is. and
one
it's-
question
don't
I
think
would
it's a
ask
smart
is,
risk.
has your board had a chance to look at our licensing bylaw, and do you have any comments? Or is that something you might have a chance to bring up tomorrow, so we could also adjust if you see something that doesn't seem to make sense?
We've distributed it to the board. We haven't had a discussion about it yet, but that's something we could probably do.
Any
tomorrow.
individual feedback from anybody?
I haven't gotten any feedback. I don't,
I'm waiting.
I didn't have any issues with it when I read through it.
Okay.
And no one's said to me they had a problem with it, so I don't foresee any.
Okay.
I just lost over.
I just didn't want to move forward without actually
Yeah,
saying,
no,
hey, did you have a thought, rather than,
Right.
Came together pretty clean and neat, not too many modifications for me. We tweaked it twice and that's it. And,
I didn't
and we
see
had one
those
more
two
tweak?
ones.
What did we talk about tonight to tweak?
Well, actually, I looked at it, you were talking
We're gonna
about
strike the
taking out
distances.
anything that was related to distances, but I went through it, there's
Because we were
nothing
gonna
that-
discuss it, but they-
There's nothing in there that was related to site specificity.
It was very generic.
Yeah.
Site things would be
Yeah, it-
considered
yeah,
or
it's-
something.
It
I heard the word
drilled down
design.
to the license, not the locations. Specificity, that was the word.
Specificity.
Yeah,
Okay.
we
That's
will-
one of those
We will
good
address
ones.
all this tomorrow night,
Okay.
and then whatever the changes that we can agree to as a board, I'll get done, and I'll get it to you by the end of the week.
And bear in mind, we'll pull out the distances.
We do know
off
it's
ours.
Thanksgiving, so if you want to rephrase end of the week, we understand if it.
Yeah. I'll try to get it done by the end of the week.
Okay.
I just, I was noticing before, you guys reference in the definitions, the independent testing labs, but I didn't see anything that addressed the siting of them. I didn't know if that's something that you wanted to.
What do you mean?
So, in the definitions,
Oh,
it says.
testing labs.
Right,
But
right.
we didn't identify
There's-
specific zones where they could occur.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah,
I
it
think-
it identifies what they are, but when you go to approved uses, it only, are allowed uses. You have marijuana outdoor cultivator, marijuana indoor cultivator, and adult marijuana retailer. And then you go back and there's, it's not listed as a restricted use either. So it's almost like, yeah, we understand it exists, but we don't have any provisions in the proposed bylaw.
So it sounds
That
like
could-
obviously it can't be in the already as we discussed earlier, so maybe it's tied
That
into the
could be
same
an
location
industrial or
as the
commercial,
retail.
right? Maybe, because it's mostly, I know commercial a lot of time intends walk-up
Yeah.
service.
But that
Or
could
it could be strictly.
But if you had a
industrial.
mixed-use building,
Yeah, mixed use or an office.
I was just curious.
Or something like that.
there you go.
Yeah.
You heard what I had to say. You guys go do what you gotta do on that.
I see here.
I'm really not trying to overly influence, I'm just bringing up thoughts.
No, I'm glad that we have
It
the
just wasn't
opportunity to work
addressed.
together on this, and, because this thing needs 2/3 at town meeting. That's one thing I wanted to bring up too. We had put a moratorium going into 2019. The reason we did that was if we can't get the town to vote for this, then we're left with nothing.
State law.
That's it.
Well, but the state doesn't live here.
We understand. We
State law
understand.
doesn't tell you what zones you can,
No.
it just says you can get a license, so they could put something in any R80 site.
Anywhere.
Wild West.
Well, we're still gonna have, at that point, hopefully, the bylaw passed, so they still have to come through a host agreement, and we can restrict it there if we had to temporarily. The concern for doing another moratorium is we get it to the banning point, and the people who are against more marijuana are just gonna vote for the moratorium again, and they're gonna shut this vote down.
Well,
And I believe that completely. If we put a moratorium on, if we put a moratorium offer out there again, the people who don't want marijuana are gonna put the moratorium in, and all this work is for nothing, because they're not gonna approve it again.
Last week, we did have the vote on the warrant, and we did allow for this special town meeting to have the moratorium. You missed that meeting, didn't know why.
What meeting was that?
Last Tuesday, we had our Board of Selectmen meeting, which was going to follow the DPW Commission meeting, which DPW got, no, it was prior to it. We had a Board of Selectmen meeting at 6:30 here, and we were going to go to DPW Commission at 7,
And it got canceled.
and that got canceled, so we just stayed here. But the
I
warrant
didn't have
approval
it.
was on because Ellen is not here this week, so she couldn't process
When
getting
did
the
we
warrants
schedule that?
printed
When did we schedule that meeting?
a week or two prior to that.
At the meeting before that.
Schedule that the meeting?
The meeting before that, we actually talked about our, like, November schedule and said, okay, we gotta do a meeting next week, we gotta do a
Yeah, I
meeting
had the
then.
19th listed as our next meeting. I expected to go to DPW, and I knew that was canceled. And I expected our next meeting to be tonight. I didn't realize we had it in between.
It sent out a
I mean, we had
No,
discussions.
I have no emails. I've checked my emails. There's none. So, I don't know.
Well, back to the moratorium, I think it's a really important thing. It could be put on the warrant after this bylaw.
Well,
And if we
the
pass
intent
the
is not
bylaw-
to come to the moratorium until the last thing.
Right.
Right, I wanna go through all of the efforts to try
Yeah.
to get something,
But-
and then the moratorium's
But
there in
if we
case
don't
we
have
need it.
anything, then anybody can do anything, and I think that's not what we want.
No, but they can do anything within the permit, what the state permisses. And we discussed it before, and I thought we'd settle this issue, that, because originally I said I agreed to have a moratorium. I believe firmly.
That's why last week I kinda supported doing it, because I thought that's what you agreed, that's how I remember.
I believe firmly that if we offer the moratorium, those who are against marijuana are just gonna want the moratorium and put the stop on this again. And then we are basically banning marijuana sales. And that's.
Problem is, it's the same either way. 3 weeks later, there's no bylaw, no moratorium in position.
Yeah.
So if they don't vote this bylaw in, they just wait in 3 weeks, and it's the same as,
Well, and the moratorium will.
I'm
have-
just bringing it up, rock and a hard place right
Yeah,
there.
The moratorium would have an end date. It has to.
Yeah.
You know, it has to
They're
have
not
an
gonna
end
let
date.
it keep extending, it's
Yeah.
only this one extension you can vote on, there's no more.
And this moratorium is
The second extension, isn't it?
June 30th,
Yeah, 6
2019 is what you're putting in.
Right.
6 months, the first one was for how long?
Just buying some more
A year?
time, hopefully for one more meeting.
You know, that-
That's it.
when you look at the split, the town of Barre voted 57% in favor of allowing marijuana in town. So a little over half the people said they wanted it. When we held those public meetings, it was about the same thing. It was about 50%. You know, there were people, you're right, that said we don't want it at all. There were people in the middle who said, well, we want it, but we want to see it managed, that kind of thing. And so I think if we get up and say, we've developed this bylaw, it's in accordance with the state regulations, we've looked at bylaws from other towns, Dennis and I attended a million meetings, we had public meetings, I think we can get up and say with good conscience that we think this is a pretty good bylaw, it's reasonable and it's balanced, and it's gonna allow the town to regulate this stuff. I think if we get up and say that, I'm hoping we can convince people to vote for it.
Yeah, 57 to 43 cents, a 30% increase, so there's 30% more people that want, so a third more. If you take your 43%, for every 3 of them, there's 4 that want, so it's a substantial increase. It's not really close like 50-50, I mean, 43 to 57% is a big difference.
14% differential.
Right off of, if you base it off your 40.
And that's of those
Three,
voting,
it's
and
a
that's
third.
always the difficulties. You don't know who's gonna show up at the meeting and who's voting.
No, you don't.
Because the ballot, larger population, bigger voting, 57-43, but who shows up at the meeting, it could be heavily one side or the other of that population.
They tend to
And
be
so you
more-
don't know.
they
This
tend
might
to-
pass because you happen to get that balance at this special town meeting, or like you said, it could be quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So-
I think we're gonna have-
We'll see what the town wants based on how they actually participate.
Yeah.
Represents-
How about the first article we put on the warrant is whether or not the town wants a moratorium on the warrant?
It's there.
See if they want it there, before we do our marijuana vote. vote to keep or strike it on the first damn thing. Tomato, tomato, right?
It's a risky play.
I think it depends on, again, what's your end goal? If you're looking for some level of regulation.
I
but
can't promise I won't try to table that article.
I would be,
I had no say in it at the meeting again.
well,
I thought we decided, I may, and I'll tell you right now,
it was a publicly
I will-
posted meeting
I
on
will-
my town government
Once
Board of
again,
Selectmen meeting.
I don't get my appointments for our meetings from my town government.
Well, you also don't get it from your email for whatever email
It's
issues
not
you
in the
have.
email. It's not in the
You
email.
can
There's
send-
nothing in
You
my
were
emails.
copied in the email he sent to us, even reminding us that morning that we have a meeting tonight.
I've opened every single one of my emails.
My,
There's nothing in it.
my town government, you can opt in for emails.
I'm not saying you're
on
wrong.
any
I don't know what the
meeting
tech
you want.
issues
It'll
are.
automatically
but I know
send
you were
it.
copied.
And anytime there's a change, it will send a change to you, an update, automatically. I get it almost
And
every
I
day
can't
for
open
the
documents still.
selectmen, planning board, common, I say common.
It's still an issue.
I can't open documents too. When there's something, see the attachments, I can't open them. I can't look at anything that's sent to me.
So, alrighty, I think I get to say thank you very much for taking your time working with us, coming in, we could discuss through it. I think it's been really positive, so
Because my neighbor
Thanks a
said
lot.
to me, you guys wouldn't have a meeting on Tuesday. I said,
have yourself a
"I
good one,
haven't."
Doug. Thank you again, Dennis.
Checked all
Much
my emails on the
appreciated.
spot.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
All right. Good luck. Let's hope this
I'm
works.
not taking your hand, Charlie, you got a bug.
Okay.
Nothing personal.
All right, I understand.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, I understand.
This is the email we're referring to. Me, Greg, Charlie.
What date is it?
Just sending a reminder, we have a meeting tonight at 6:30. It was sent November 13th, the day of the meeting at 10:18 in the
I'll
morning.
go check, because I saw nothing in my emails. Because
I'm just explaining why I was saying what I was saying. Again, I don't know if you
Because-
received it, because I don't know the issues that could have,
Wednesday or Thursday,
issues.
someone talked to me and said, geez, why aren't you at the meeting? And I said, what meeting? And I went back and checked my emails to make sure I hadn't missed something then, and I had nothing.
okay. And I don't know what's causing that. I know sometimes.
I don't either.
I got
But I
certain
didn't
phones,
know-
like if I
I'd like
don't
to see it. I'd love
open
to
the
s-
app, it doesn't
I'd love to see
update.
the minutes from our last meeting, which was on, this is what, the 19th? So would we meet on November 6th?
The 5th was
We meet
the
5th, so
previous meeting.
We could look at the meeting minutes from the 5th and see if we set our date in there. I didn't believe we had.
And honestly, just so you know, Greg, I did delay that meeting for almost 20 minutes, hoping you were gonna show up, because I thought you were completely aware of it. So it's not like we just
Now, last time
started
that
right
one shot me
at,
anyhow, said, you coming up here? I'm like, oh crap, and I was up here like that. You sent me personally that, like, at that instantly. But, yeah.
okay, next item. We'll just jump right to the quick one. Appointment of Open Space and Recreation Committee member. I believe we have Susan Ash.
Yes.
Offered to participate. I'll make a motion to appoint Susan Ash to the Open Space and Recreation Committee.
I will second.
I believe in the packet somewhere was an email from Susan. Any discussion? Call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Henry Woods Memorial Library Capital Upgrade Agreement discussion. If, I'll just try to summarize and then let Andrew get into more details. It generally comes down to the Board of Library Trustees, which is not a town agency or group, owns the property. But the town, working with the state, et cetera, does a lot of funding for the entire operations and many of the capital upgrades that they can't get through other trustees and donations. The discussion here is how do you fit in a building you don't own into your capital plan?
Well,
I know within, in my time here, discussing capital plans, and now we're heading into developing the 2020 capital plan, they basically brought to us that, they need a new roof, they need new air handling units that are 18 years old, they're past their lifespan. I forget what else I referred to in there. But in the past, they were talking about some drainage issues that were around the building that were in discussions with the town. The town would take care of, but that weren't done. And it just kind of puts a sense of, if the town is going to put it into our capital plan to do these things, if we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that building, we need to have some sort of agreement in place that kind of at least memorializes the town's commitment to doing that. And whether or not that's just an agreement that says, the town, it shall be responsible for this stuff. I think that needs to exist. I don't think that we can just say, yeah, we're gonna throw $70,000 at the building and then just, try to explain that if it's not a building that the town owns and ultimately doesn't have any sort of other control. I think it just would be a good idea to kind of sit at the table with everybody who's involved and get some sort of agreement in place. I know that in the past, large-scale upgrades were funded by the BLA, and then when times got tough, then it fell on the town. So,
Yeah.
does that, was it just the fact that they couldn't afford it and that it fell on the town, or is it some sort of agreement? And I know that, in years past, there was discussions about the town taking over the building. Is that a discussion that's still in play, or is that or do we look at other terms?
My opinion is it should be in play. The town taking it over. But I also believe that there would have to be some type of memorandum of agreement or something with Board of Library Trustees or whatever group, BLA.
It's the BLA I believe owns the building. Board of Trustees is the elected board that oversees the operations.
Okay.
And then it does.
So it sounds like there's actually two different groups we have to talk to.
Yeah.
One that decides how to manage the building
Mhm.
and one that actually owns it.
Correct.
And all we fund in our budget is the personnel and the material in the building.
Correct. Right. And I know in the past, there have been, some minor upgrades that are done. There's been, the town's helped in obtaining grants for upgrades. But I think that, maybe like the past 10 to 12 years, it's really kind of fallen more on the town to make sure that those upgrades are done. And now that we're in a point where there's more serious upgrades that really need to be done. Now it's, okay, who really is gonna be the responsible party in this?
And I would suggest we need to have a meeting that includes all three entities.
Right, that's who I copied on that email, was a
Okay.
representative from all 3 boards.
Is there a lease
Okay,
agreement?
so Lester represents who?
Uh,
The trustees or the BLA?
He sits on both, but I believe he represents the BLA.
Okay, so his email responded regarding the trustees, his response, saying that they'll have.
I'm sorry, he does, in his email, he's responding as a Board of Trustees member. Kate Lathrop responds as a BLA member.
She's responding as a BLA member,
Correct.
okay.
Are there funds trading hands for leasing the building between one association and the other? No. So one association is just responsible for the ownership of the building, and therefore the maintenance of the building, and everything else that goes with it.
Right.
BLA also, prior to the town's involvement, was responsible for decisions of the entire budget that the trustees would then manage. They would say, this is how much money we have this year, and then the trustees would have to correct.
Do you know who's determined that they need these things? Obviously, the roof, if an issue is leaking, they need to do some work on the roof, doesn't Is that a slate roof in that building,
It
you
is.
know?
Yeah.
I mean, slate roof isn't something you typically replace, you repair it. The slates last indefinitely.
Well,
Cracked slates are replaced.
fasteners don't though.
No, but cracked slates are replaced and they're usually nailed through like anything else, and the nails very rarely rot all the way through. It's typically slates that break off around the nails that fall out of place. And those hooks you drive in between the two slates, you slide a slate out, drive a hook in, and drop the new slate back down for the repair work. But yeah, it's necessary to do those things. The air handling is because they think it's inefficient. They want it. Have they done a survey of parts breaking down? Because that's, yeah, it's the expensive end.
It's been breaking down. The operational lifespan of it is 15 years. It's 18 years old. And looking at it, it's actually a rooftop unit that was installed on the ground. So, because it's what it is, the ground unit is a vertical unit that takes in the air horizontally as opposed to the, this one is a horizontal unit that lays flat and actually gets weeds around it and grows up. So when it was originally put in, it was inappropriately spec'd, or somebody was trying to save some money by getting a less expensive unit.
So they're misusing the unit for its design, and that's probably leading to the failure of it, but lucky it's made it this far.
Right.
So they're looking at just upgrading that, or they're looking at controls and pieces of ductwork, or just controls for that inside? What?
I think it's just been noted as the air handling unit itself has been the only thing that's been identified. I don't think it was a full
'Cause I don't think
system
that's-
upgrade was.
Shouldn't be that expensive in an item, so I wonder if they're talking about roof replacement, if they're talking about $100,000 of anticipated costs.
That was a number that I threw out.
Oh, okay, because I don't think things should be that expensive.
Between the roof and the air handling unit, everything and going in, you're talking of excess of $100,000. And I think that if we're talking that number, investment of that money, what.
Yeah, I think we should find out better what that number is before we get too far with that, because I
Right.
don't think either of those items should be getting us any place close to that number. Unless they're talking about wholesale replacing the roof, then again, that certainly is a major project.
Right.
That require licensed supervisor to look at the roof and determine if it needs repair or replacement, and how much repair. That's something we can probably get free estimates for pretty easily.
And that's just the things that are on the table right now. I don't know what's gonna.
It's gonna
what's
cost
next.
too much for us to just get a simple estimate and then go with somebody.
And I guess the
We'll have to
question
have, which means by state law,
We need to-
municipality has to have a designed scope for any roofing contractor to bid on. So
I
you can't
don't think-
skip a step because someone might know how to do it.
Right.
The state law requires us to put a design bid spec out.
I don't think it's that big of a project. That's my point.
Is it more than $10,000?
The project.
But your estimate, would it be more than $10,000?
For repairing the slate, I would sincerely doubt it. Unless they have an awful lot of leaks all over that building, no. But it depends on the scope and what they want to look to do. So we need to better understand the scope.
I got you.
Yeah,
I got you. If it's one spot, you're right.
And these are just four things that have been brought up. The question is, and then what? So I think it's just like, okay, these are on the table. If we can get an agreement in place that says that, this is, who's responsible, then then we can have something in place, for years down the road and future capital projects as they come, down the line, rather than just looking at it as okay, yeah, all right, we can just handle that for now. Because then it becomes, okay, what's next?
But I'm saying, before we have a discussion with them about any of that sort of things, we should get a better idea of the scope of the work that they want to do. The air handler, I would think, is pretty straightforward. Even the controls and controlling motors inside, there's not too many, it's not that big of a project. The air handling unit is going to be the most expensive part of that. The roof, depending on what they want to do, the prices could change dramatically. If you're ripping off the slate, which is a piece-by-piece project, and removing the nails and everything else, and then reslating, that's a real expensive way to go. Now you're looking at probably a couple $100,000. If you're talking about ripping off and going asphalt, then maybe you are talking $100,000 or $70,000 or $50,000 even. But if you're
It's
talking
a
about repairing
historic
the
building,
slate,
you're not going to asphalt.
if you're talking about repairing the slate and maybe replacing some of the caps on it here and there, which would be, copper or some sort of four metal caps, it still should be a much more reasonable expense than that, I would think.
Could be a
Depend-
slate or terracotta cap too.
It depends on the scope. A lot of times they could have a formed copper cap right on top of that runs across the ridge. It's I doubt we have terracotta up here, it tends to not do so well.
Well, Worcester City Hall had it for the caps,
Really?
lasted 100 years.
Is it terracotta or was it metal to be?
No, it's
Looked like
still
it.
there, it's still falling now,
I've
because
seen
we
a lot.
have a bid for $500,000 to
Oh,
do
okay.
percentage repairs in whole scale.
Right.
And then use the good recovered pieces to finish fixing everything else.
I see.
In other words, it's a complex little,
They make metal roof parts now that have the same look as a terracotta, but for metal pieces that, of course, technically
you
now
can
we're
get the
not-
right aesthetic look, a
now
lot
we're
of
not
times
there.
that'll pass somebody's
Right.
review. Anyway, my recommendation is the Board of Trustees needs to come up with a 5-year capital plan for that building and present it, just like every other department. And we need a discussion with the BLA regarding commitment, ownership, and long-term responsibility. If we're gonna fund an upgrade, are we, the town, now responsible for managing that? Technically, by law, we are. But now we're doing it on a building we don't own. So we need an agreement between the town and them saying, no matter what, if we do something, we are held harmless.
I don't know if we're gonna.
BLA cannot come against the town for doing something that the BLA asked the town to do, unless you can show that there's true negligence in our efforts in trying to manage the scope properly.
Can we really even expend town funds on someone else's building?
We can if it serves the general public.
We should make sure there's not limitations to that, either in monetary amounts or in use of it.
The reason I say
it's a
you can is
stretch.
because the only way they're getting any state funds is for the same purpose, is it serves the general public. They're not some private library getting state formula grant funds.
And it's matched off the donations we make towards the operational costs of running the library, but that's different than the structure. The library itself isn't the building, the library itself is the personnel and the equipment within it. The structure it's in is, we just gotta be careful.
I don't disagree, and we should just double check what line we can cross or not.
You
with Jim
typically see
Baird,
this where
just see what
fundraising
he
comes in.
knows.
Fundraising comes in and people make donations and you find a benefactor that is wealthy and has an interest in the library, they sometimes get some good donations.
The BLA does that, but we have some accounts set up for the same thing. People said, here's money, it goes to the library. And it just had to go in an account until it got spent at the library somewhere. I don't know how much we have left, but we've had them.
Well, they had a lot at one point.
That's what I mean.
And
It's
if-
donated to the town, but
They don't
identified
take
not to
more.
be general fund.
And if it says library, does that mean to the structure and the ability, of the owner, to the Barre Library Association that runs the library, which is the people and the books and the assets of within that building?
If all it says is library, it's anything you can define with the word library in it. Library operations, library capital, library administration, library books. If that's how the check, the donation was made and all it said was library, name a sentence with the word library in it and you could apply it to it pretty much. As long as it wasn't the friend of a library who needs his car fixed. But if it has to do with their operations, if it has to do with their capital equipment, if it happens to do with their site, it cannot benefit an individual employee, it cannot benefit individual person in town, it has to benefit the
But I would
general
say-
public intent of the
I would say
library.
if the library operated by leasing the old town hall from us for $1 a year, and they were leasing the building, I would think that that donation going to the town to refurbish your building would be a misuse. And that's what I'm saying. The library itself for us
Well, if-
is the
are
personnel.
you saying
and
if somebody-
equipment, and the association runs the personnel and equipment, and if you have a separate entity, don't understand why it's separate. If the BLA didn't exist in the association, the Barre, and the library, owned to maintain the building as well as part of it, absolutely, I'd say it's fair game. But because the library and its association is a separate entity from that owner of the building, I think we're gonna be careful. I think it's a separate structure. It's separated, they separate it. For what purpose? Why did it become separate? Why isn't it one association and one board and one building? Why isn't it one entity? Why is it two?
Legal, I think what we'd have to set up is a lease agreement. And it might have to be a 99-year lease where it actually falls into a de facto ownership. Where the BLA would have to say, we are leasing the library from the BLA for a library for the town. And then the town can invest in it as if they own the site.
Was that a private building in years past? Was that a public
Still
building
is.
turned over?
Always private. Library was always private, right?
So why could not that building be
They had it very-
donated to the Barre Library Association and they run it? Or,
No,
I mean, that's
They
what I'm
are
saying.
the owners of it now, and they're private. BLA
BLA is.
is private.
And they ran on endowments, and unfortunately, for one reason or another, those endowments apparently aren't there anymore. It's a long story.
Very cautious to look at our capital plan and funding to a building. that
But you
we
bring
don't
up a
own.
good point in investing in somebody else's property
Somebody
without a
else's
long-term commitment that
And if-
proves that it's actually for the library.
And our
'cause-
town comes together and they decide, you know, we're gonna sign a bond, we're gonna put $1 million and refurbish that building. Then the library association says, you know what? Let's sell this sucker and get $2 million for it. We'll buy a small house over here and start again and get some more books. And there's nothing to
You're
stop
right.
them from doing that. And we're investing capital into something we have no ownership or guarantees towards. Not that
They'd
that
have
would
to move
happen.
out of town though if they did that.
I have seen,
I
my brothers and a friends of library board in Connecticut, and the stuff that the town does with some of the friends' money and stuff that goes through their accounts, it's a constant battle between the public and private entities that are investing in that structure and the use of it, and it's tricky. And that's, I worry that,
Yeah. No, I got you. Technically, we probably should have that type of a lease agreement anyway, because we have town employees working in there and town services being funded through there, and we have no legal right to actually do that outside of the other side appreciating what's being done and having no reason to say, get out of my building. I mean, it's a mutual benefit, so it never really forced the legal paperwork to happen, but
but it should, and then once it does, then I think we would, as a leasehold agreement, we'd have the right to improve the property, and then we can put funds into it. Because it's a leasehold improvement, and that's our obligation and right to maintain the structure and do such to it. So that might be something they want to look into. Be it $1 for a 90-year lease or a 20-year lease or
there's
something.
more
that's
to
fine.
it though, just so when we get into the details of the lease.
Yes. But I'm saying that's an avenue, because leasehold improvements is the legitimate
Mhm.
expenditure in any business when you're leasing a property or a building. And therefore, if we need to invest in it, we may just need to get that. I'm not saying we shouldn't help the library. I want to be careful that it's done right and that we handle the town's funds properly doing it.
No, I agree. Because you're right, if we just do something on, like the handshake agreement we've been doing for years
Just
and
the wrong way to do
it
stuff.
doesn't work out for whatever reason, you don't have any paperwork to support wherever you're at as to whether we did it right, they did it right, we did something based on their information was inaccurate, not because of any other reason than they didn't know better.
And logically, if we're making improvements like this and they expect this to be another 15-year project, then we can sign a 15-year leasehold agreement. And we'll invest something in the building that we expect of a 15-year life, and we can pay it off over that time frame and spread it out on a debt account. Make it good for the town, and then we assure that it's there for the town and for the people of the town that we make that investment. Then when the 15 years is done, if they're doing something else in the building, that's fine. But we make sure that the life of the investment we make is serving us. Which obviously I think that's their intent anyways, but it just, it's silly not to ask, well, that's our intent anyways, and good, then there's no problem signing the document. You know, when somebody, they promise you, promise you, promise you, if they refuse to do something to put that in writing, then that promise isn't very good. If they are gonna be there and it's gonna stay here for 15 years and signing some sort of leasehold agreement with us, doesn't give us the structure, it just gives us the right to go ahead and invest in it for that time frame. And make sure we're protected, and the people who invest in the library, and the people that use the library, and the employees that are in that library are all protected for that time frame.
My only concern here is knowing where to draw the line of, once you sign a lease, who's owning the ultimate responsibility for maintaining the building, and who has the right to decide how funds get used in the building. Because right now, we're still dealing with 3 parties: library trustees, the BLA, and the town. The BLA owns the building. Say they lease it to the town.
Well-
Trustees usually control the operation of the library. They're the ones that work directly with the director of the library, Stephanie,
And we fund that.
and they say this, the operational side.
We fund that through the
But
town.
they
meeting.
also are the ones that talk about the capital upgrades on the building. I don't want the town to be in a position where they create a capital plan, a 5-year plan, we act on it, and then we're liable if we fail to see something within that plan that got missed, yet all the information in the direction and decision-making was theirs. We were just told to go, please procure it, and then give it back to us to run it. They run it, and then something doesn't happen, and then we did or didn't do our job to properly review a design, or do our job to properly review a contractor.
Right.
So those details somehow need to be identified in the lease on who's the ultimate responsible party. And if it's us, it's not their final decision on how our funds get spent in that building.
Right, but we.
And that's all I mean.
Yeah,
We
can
didn't
protect-
need to have to figure out how to put that in there
We
properly.
can protect it by having a leasehold agreement that basically says they're
Mhm.
responsible for maintaining the property in a condition for us to use it. However, if the town should choose to invest in the building for capital upgrades, it'll be, done at a town meeting, so that people get to say if they want to do it. And we shall have oversight for that project during the installation of that project. It's simple, and if we take the oversight, we shouldn't have a problem standing behind it. And they should be protected too. If they ask us to do it and we go ahead and choose the contractor and we do the bidding and we install the equipment, then we should be responsible for it. It shouldn't fall back on them if we screw up. So we do our diligence, we make sure we've done the project properly, but we can specify that any leasehold improvements that are approved by the town, that we shall have oversight for that improvement project. The rest of the facility remains in their control and their general maintenance.
It might be worth identifying, say, in a lease, that each capital improvement plan for each fiscal year, no matter how many projects in that year, will have its own separate memorandum of understanding
Glad you brought this up.
that identifies the roles and the responsibilities each time. That way it can vary. It might be a job that's just painting the walls. We don't have to be there watching them paint the walls.
just-
I think it's important to have this meeting with the representatives of.
Absolutely.
So that way everybody's on the same page.
But this
And
gives us a good
these
chance
are
to
things
talk about it.
that can be kind of discussed and see
Right.
where they're at. I mean,
And this is, of course, was initial, so we could all just get some stuff off our brains, think about what we think
Which
is
is what we
important
need
to
to do.
discuss, and
Now we can go on the meeting with them better prepared on what we're thinking about it. And what my reservations obviously are about investing any money in that structure unless we have some sort of agreement for leasehold and some oversight of the money we spend. I don't want to hand it to them and say, once they have it, it's hard to control what they do with it. I make sure that the project goes the way we'd like to see it go and that it's done accordingly.
And I don't want to have an estimate that says it's going to cost $40,000 to do something. We give them $40,000, but it only costs them $20,000. They got $20,000 to spend something else because
It's, again, our oversight.
how much are we involved or not? And I'm not saying that would ever be an intent. And that was a drastic, don't get me wrong, that being off by 2 times would be,
Oh, it could happen.
it can.
It can happen,
But
you know
I
that.
wouldn't want it to then go get reallocated somewhere else without telling somebody.
So
and
we need to
being
get a
able
scope of the
verify
work
it,
they're
so-
looking for, a scope of the work they're looking for before a meeting, if they could, and the type, that they're looking to repair, they're looking to replace.
That's right.
And that'll get us a better handle on estimates. We should be able to get that
Well, they
pretty,
should,
pretty close without putting out to bid for it yet. and deciding how we want to proceed and knowing what the cost will be to go out to bid and get
Well,
the numbers.
they should get
solid.
the estimates, not us.
And they can get estimates.
And we'll verify,
And they can
but
get
you know what I
estimates.
mean?
They can just get
I
estimates
think
too.
we ought to
'cause-
get the estimate.
No, but they're not held to public procurement rules like we are. If they're just an association for libraries,
I
they
know,
can go
but
get estimates.
I just think with the way history has gone and everything,
The-
we should
Well,
hire the design consultant.
And there's the other thing,
Do
if we do agree to the work, if
And
we
there
have
could be another
oversight,
Department that gets an
What?
estimate. If any other department that gets an estimate, they're not asking Andrew to get the estimate for them usually, right?
That's, well,
but if they get the estimate, they can go get the bids how they want to get the bids. Then we can find out the pricing, and if we have oversight, but they run the contract, they still aren't going to be subject to, prevailing wages. They can still get a contractor to come do it at a normal price without going prevailing wage, which if we,
As long as it
If we-
isn't
if-
our funds.
Yeah,
Because
'cause
technically,
once
if
we
you
get
do
the
any
funds-
improvement on a municipally owned, well, leased property, it counts
it would
under
still have to
DCAM
be-
as
it would
prevailing
still have to be.
wage.
So then we're going to have to make sure we do it at prevailing wage, because there's no way to get around it if we want to have control of oversight.
And that prevailing wage also, I think, only applies depending on the size of the work. I think still, what is it, 2,000, 5,000 and below doesn't have the prevailing
Yeah,
wage
but
requirement.
I think it's
It's
under
a
five, I think it's under five.
Yeah, I think 5 is, yeah, because I think anything over that's.
I think it's a threshold, when I've done work for Groton, only projects that went under five could go through in a bid. If they got too high from that, they had to stop and put it out to spec, and then I could resubmit the same bid with everyone else later, but, once you get to that, I think it was 5,000 was the most you could get at work before you trip that. So I'm sure we'll get there, unless we spec a piece of the roof they're repairing out.
Hmm.
This section this year, this section next year, and they repair a section each year, they might get away with $5,000 repairs each year. You address the
If
things.
they
that-
can
that
clearly
leak.
define it, right.
Right. We're gonna
Clean
work on
break
this
between sections.
front piece in this corner and do this much and repair slate in the metal on it, and they can come in under that, then you could still get it done for a reasonable
This guy
cost.
wants to go home and have a long vacation.
Is that right? Budget's
Just
gotta-
having fun.
Budget's gotta go out this week anyway.
Okay. But I think we're generally on the same page with, we gotta just get it right on the paper and then we can move forward.
Yeah.
We shouldn't just keep going as
We need to make sure.
business as usual
Before
because
we meet
we're in a
with
different
them,
world.
they need to come a little more concise in what they're looking for before we meet with them, so we can all have a productive, quick meeting without being too drawn out.
Okay, that was that. Do we have anything else we wanna say on that for now, or we're good for now? Okay, there's something, Selectmen's report is where I'm gonna pull this out, but it was more of a notice, it probably even falls under correspondence better. I'm saying it now partly to get it out there publicly. National Grid submitted to Department of Public Utilities a request to review and potentially upgrade or increase their delivery rates to all of their territory customers. Part of it, they're saying, is to justify increased costs and maintenance. Part of it is to help fund potentially infrastructure upgrades
in loans.
or bigger incentive plans, potential some loans, things. My personal position is, they like to say, for the average homeowner, it's only gonna cost you another $5 a month. That's how they put it in the email. It's not gonna cost you much. But then one thing they did put at the very end is they also wanted to impose a cost, an additional cost on facilities that have net metering agreements in place. And their response is to say they're not paying the delivery charges as others are. I'm bringing that up because DPU is right now receiving, or they're open to receiving any and all positions on the topic before they make a decision So whether it's us as a town or any individual out there that has a significant size solar array and is concerned about their existing net metering account, they may want to speak with their lawyers and or others to present something to the DPU to explain the issue with providing an agreement to a user for anywhere from 10 to 20 years, you will get this type of rate, and then later having the state agree with your utility contractor that that agreement didn't work, so we want to now tax them or add additional fees to make up for our agreement that failed us. And therefore, they're getting around changing the actual agreement net metering price, because they're not gonna change that. They're just gonna add another fee on, so it looks like it covers it. That's how it was generally presented in the email. They didn't give you the whole disclosure and, whatever, what do they call it when they give it someone to the something to the DPU? Some submittal package. Well, they didn't include that in the email, but I do think that many people should be aware of this. It's something that I think flies under the radar. Most people don't realize when this happens until after it happens. But it may be in your best interest to speak to anybody you can that may have a voice that could affect what's going on, because they're gonna raise your rates. How high they raise your rates and how they affect your existing net metering may be determined based on the response from the general public, as much as from the utility companies that generally support themselves, and a DPU that has generally been utility company first in their positions and how they regulate the utility companies. Yes, I should not have said that, because now nobody's gonna like me regarding DPU. But it's the truth. If you want your voice heard, you gotta say it now, or you're gonna be paying more. And there's a lot more to it if you really read into it. I just can't give you the complete summary. So pay attention. Maybe there's something we can, I don't know, do you guys think it's worth any type of post on the website just saying, please notice this is occurring? And maybe it references the DPU docket or something that is, it's just a way to notify the customers they can act on it or not. I'm not suggesting our website should tell them to or not to. It's just saying, hey, for your information, we've been aware. Here is how you can or cannot take steps. If there's like just a contact to DPU that you can.
Just put the same information I got in the email.
That's fine. I just.
Yeah, as long as it's general, we can put it out there, make sure.
Yeah,
people
I don't
are actually
wanna
seeing it.
post what I just said, which was kind of a weighted position.
Mhm.
I just want to post the topic and let people
Understand, yeah.
do what
that's
they want with it.
Kind of shady. You come to an agreement with someone that you don't like it, so you go behind their back to give permission to change it without modifying the actual agreement you already have in
Right.
place.
And they just changed the whole program, and National Grid doesn't have any open net metering space anyway left. So it's interesting that now that it's pretty much full of capacity and there's no more allowed and the state's not looking to increase it, they're now looking to somewhat reverse it through this other additional charge they want to add to all net metering only people, not all people. Customers. So anyway, that's all I had to add. Give you got something to add?
No.
No,
Motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
Boom. Call for vote.
Aye.